Your 11-month-old son, Zayden. You've given everything up to be with Miss Ham. Promiscuous and foggy past have caused you to doubt that you fathered her son.
Yes, Your Honor.
Do as much as I would want him to do.
You're tired of playing daddy because you got to step up.
He wasn't there for the birth. And as far as a baby shower or anything like that, his family didn't want to be a part of that because they didn't think that Zayden was his.
So
the presence of truth in the courtroom is transformative because it forces every individual to confront the reality of who they were, who they are, and who they must now become. The DNA test, though clinical and straightforward, acts as a catalyst for deep emotional revelation. Judge Lauren Lake often reminds those standing before her that the courtroom is not just a place for legal rulings, but a place where patterns are revealed, cycles are exposed, and lives have the opportunity to change direction. This transformation is not gentle. When truth challenges identity, it creates internal disruption. People who believed they were parents may discover that the bond they felt was emotional rather than biological. People who attempted to hide betrayal may find themselves exposed. People who have avoided accountability may find that the law will not bend to protect denial. The truth changes everything, and in doing so, it demands that individuals respond with either growth or resistance. Many of the stories discussed in the Divorce Course podcast or the Truth Changes Everything podcast highlight this emotional crossroads. Guests speak about the moment they heard the DNA result and how instantly the emotional framework of their life shifted. Some describe feeling relief because clarity arrived after months or years of stress and confusion. Others describe grief because the result shattered the emotional narrative they had constructed about their family. These experiences demonstrate that truth is not only an answer, it is a psychological turning point. The relationship between law and justice becomes particularly visible in these moments. The law can determine who is financially responsible, who is listed on a birth certificate, who owes child support, and who has parental rights. But justice seeks to understand intention, emotional history, commitment, harm, and the potential for healing. Judge Lauren Lake does not simply declare a father based on DNA. She evaluates whether that individual has acted like a father, whether that person is willing to step up moving forward, and whether the emotional environment can support the child's development in a healthy way. This reflects a core principle in the concept of justice in jurisprudence. Justice must apply not only to the facts of the case but to the human beings affected by those facts. A child is not evidence. A relationship is not reduced to a laboratory result. The court acknowledges these emotional realities, even as it must base decisions in legal clarity. At the same time, the emotional pain associated with cheating stories often does not end with the revelation of biological truth. The betrayal cuts deeper because it affects not only the romantic relationship, but also the meaning of family, identity, and legacy. Trust is not easy to rebuild when it has been broken on a foundational level. The evidence stage in divorce case proceedings often reveals how long individuals have avoided acknowledging problems in their relationships. The DNA result becomes the final confirmation of something that one partner may have sensed intuitively long before the court appearance. However, not all DNA-related revelations are rooted in betrayal. Adoption stories' full episodes show a different dimension of truth. Many individuals grow up with loving, committed adoptive families, yet still feel a longing to understand their biological origins. The DNA test becomes a pathway to identity. In these circumstances, the emotional impact is often softer, more hopeful. Reunion stories highlight the human need for belonging, meaning, and connection to personal history. In these cases, the test does not destroy, and it restores. It helps individuals complete the narrative of who they are, the emotional journey after. Receiving DNA results also connects to the celebrate. Recovery testimonies of individuals who have transformed their lives after facing painful truths. People speak of learning to accept responsibility, to make amends, and to rebuild. They reflect on the process of acknowledging harm and working toward healing. These testimonies illustrate that while truth may initially feel overwhelming, it can also be liberating. When individuals accept truth rather than resist it, they free themselves from secrecy, guilt, and emotional confusion. This is why Judge Lauren Lake emphasizes personal accountability. In her courtroom, she calls individuals to maturity. She reminds them that parenting requires consistency, discipline, honesty, and emotional presence. She insists that individuals stop blaming their circumstances their past relationships, or their pain, and instead make choices that protect the emotional well-being of their children. Children remain the center of every decision. They are the reason why the court seeks clarity. They are the reason why the law requires biological responsibility, as seen in Supreme Court child support rulings. They are the reason why secrecy, avoidance, and denial must be confronted. A child deserves to know where they come from. A child deserves emotional stability. A child deserves to be raised by adults who have accepted truth, no matter how difficult that acceptance may be. The truth also creates a distinction between biological parenthood and emotional parenthood. Some individuals learn that they are not biologically connected to the child they have raised, yet they choose to remain a parent. This decision reflects the highest form of commitment. It shows that love, consistency, guidance, and presence form the foundation of parenthood. But even this emotional bond must be built on honesty. A parent who chooses to stay despite DNA evidence is making a powerful, conscious choice, a choice rooted in mature responsibility. In contrast, some individuals, upon learning the truth, choose to disconnect completely. They may withdraw emotionally or physically, believing that the absence of biological connection removes responsibility. Judge Lauren Lake challenges this mindset. She reminds them that emotional abandonment has lasting impact. She encourages them to embrace the role of fatherhood or motherhood based on love rather than biology. However, she does not excuse those who refuse responsibility. The law must still protect the child. The healing process that follows truth is continuous. It requires emotional honesty, communication, vulnerability, and sometimes therapy or family counseling. It requires that individuals release resentment, seek forgiveness, and rebuild trust gradually. Many relationships do not survive the shock of betrayal and revelation, and in those cases, healing occurs individually rather than together. The separation becomes an opportunity to break generational cycles of secrecy, abandonment, emotional avoidance, or dishonesty. The stories that follow the DNA test reveal who individuals choose to become. Some rebuild their lives with intention. Some commit to being better parents, more honest partners, more emotionally present family members. Some learn to communicate without anger. Some learn to listen. Some learn to admit wrongdoing without defensiveness. This growth reflects the deeper purpose of truth, not to destroy but to transform. Truth is a beginning. The final understanding is this. The DNA test does not define family. It defines responsibility. What comes next is chosen. Judge Lauren Lake's courtroom is a place where truth is spoken aloud so that healing, whether individual or shared, can finally begin. The test result is not the final chapter, but the turning point from which every new chapter becomes intentional. The truth may be painful. The truth may be heavy. The truth may require change, but the truth is the only foundation on which love, trust, identity, and family can be honestly rebuilt. The emotional gravity surrounding DNA test revelations often exposes the delicate line between what people want to believe and what is true. In Judge Lauren Lake's courtroom, individuals stand in a position where the emotional narratives they have constructed confront undeniable biological evidence. Although the DNA test result is scientifically simple, a percentage, a definitive yes or no, the emotional meaning carried within that result is profound. People regret taking these tests not because of the result itself, but because the result forces them to face realities they have avoided, suppressed, or justified for long periods of time. The courtroom environment, especially as seen in the Divorce Course podcast and similar discussions across legal commentary platforms like the Game-Changing Attorney podcast, is a place where truth is not softened. The legal structure is built on clarity, whereas human memory is built on selective recollection. Individuals often tell their stories in a way that makes emotional sense to them. But evidence, unlike memory, does not shift to accommodate pain or fear. When Judge Lauren Lake asks questions, she is not interrogating identity. She is searching for honesty in the emotional narrative that led to the case in front of her. In many situations, the relationship between law and justice becomes complex. The law can determine who is legally responsible for a child, but justice asks deeper questions. Who has emotionally been there for the child? Who has shown care, protection, and stability? Who has acted as a parent even when the biological circumstances were unclear? The concept of justice in jurisprudence acknowledges that law alone cannot solve emotional conflict. Law can only create structure, Justice must emerge from personal accountability. And accountability is often the missing piece in relationships where cheating stories have taken place. Infidelity does not occur in isolation. It is usually tied to emotional dissatisfaction, immaturity, past trauma, or unresolved insecurity. But no justification erases the consequences that follow. When a child's identity becomes uncertain because of betrayal, the emotional impact multiplies. The person who has been cheated on often experiences the DNA test as confirmation, not only of betrayal, but of the stolen trust, the emotional labor that now feels wasted, and the family identity that no longer feels real. In some cases, it is the mother who regrets the DNA test because it reveals a complexity in the child's parentage that she emotionally does not feel equipped to explain. In other cases, it is the presumed father who regrets the test, because knowing the truth means he must choose between his emotional bond and the biological reality. And in still others, grandparents mourn because they believe they were attached to a biological grandchild, only to learn that the connection was one of care rather than blood. These emotional truths reveal how deeply the human heart seeks belonging, yet belonging does not rely solely on biology. In Adoption Stories, full episodes and testimonies across Celebrate Recovery Testimonies communities, many individuals speak about how love, presence, and consistency define family far more than genetics. The DNA test provides biological clarification, but the emotional meaning of family is shaped by care. Judge Lauren Lake often reinforces that a father is defined not only by DNA, but by responsibility. However, responsibility must be rooted in truth. Even emotional fatherhood must begin with clarity. Otherwise, confusion and pain will repeat through generations. When families enter the courtroom during a divorce case, the DNA test can influence child support, custody, and emotional closure. The Supreme Court Child Support Guidelines often rest on the principle that biological parents share financial responsibility. This is meant to protect the child, but the emotional effect on adults can be devastating. A person may have invested years into a relationship believing in a shared biological bond, only to be redefined by one piece of evidence. The law adjusts quickly, but the heart takes time to heal. The Adverse Inference in Evidence Act becomes relevant in cases where individuals refuse to provide DNA, hide communication records, or avoid test results. The court interprets refusal as potential admission. This underscores one of the core realities of justice. Silence in the presence of truth is not neutral. When individuals avoid clarity, they reveal that the truth may not serve their emotional narrative. But the legal system does not exist to comfort emotional narratives. It exists to establish facts. This is where emotional breakdown frequently occurs. People want the court to validate their version of events. They want the judge to understand their feelings more than their actions. Judge Lauren Lake listens to emotion with empathy, but she always returns to accountability. Her courtroom is not only a place for truth, it is a place where individuals are reminded of the consequences of choices made long before they entered the room. She guides them to see that emotional pain does not remove responsibility. Meanwhile, the podcast discussions around such cases often emphasize how individuals process the legal and emotional aftermath. Lawyers discuss the burden of presenting truth in a form the court can recognize. Therapists discuss the emotional restructuring required when family identity changes. Parents discuss learning to co-parent after trust has been shattered. These reflections show that truth is not the end of the story. It is the beginning of a reconstruction process. The emotional impact is especially significant when children are involved. Children do not understand betrayal, DNA testing, or legal arguments. They simply look for stability, love, and safety. When the adults in their lives are locked in emotional conflict, the child becomes the silent center of a storm they did not create. Judge Lauren Lake prioritizes the child's needs above adult emotions. She encourages individuals to rebuild stability, not continue cycles of abandonment or emotional volatility. For some, the result of a DNA test becomes the beginning of maturity. They recognize the need to stop patterns of emotional impulsiveness. They choose honesty over secrecy. They learn to communicate with clarity instead of anger. They rebuild trust slowly and intentionally. These are the individuals who later share recovery testimonies of transformation, not because the truth was easy, but because they allowed the truth to change them. For others, the truth becomes a source of bitterness. They refuse responsibility. They blame others. They create narratives where they are victims of circumstances they themselves shaped. In these cases, the pain continues. The emotional harm spreads. The cycle repeats. The difference between healing and repeating lies in accountability. The DNA test is never just a medical procedure. It is a confrontation with truth. And truth once spoken requires response. It demands maturity. When individuals stand before Judge Lauren Lake, the courtroom becomes more than a legal environment. It becomes a mirror. Some see their reflection clearly for the first time. In many modern family disputes, DNA test results have become a turning point that permanently alters lives, relationships, self-identity, and the understanding of family responsibility. People often believe they are prepared for the truth, but people regret taking these tests when the results challenge the stories they have told themselves. In Judge Lauren Lake's courtroom, this regret is visible not only in tears but also in silence, hesitation, and the overwhelming realization that once the result is spoken, there is no return to how things were before. The courtroom becomes a space where personal history collides with biological fact, and emotional narratives collide with scientific evidence. The presence of evidence in such cases does not simply identify biological relationships. It forces individuals to confront their actions, their past choices, and their values. This connects directly to the concept of justice in jurisprudence, where justice is not merely the enforcement of rules, but the pursuit of fairness, accountability, and truth. Judge Lauren Lake's role becomes more than judicial. It becomes reflective of how the relationship between law and justice is tested inside real people's lives. The evidence stage in divorce cases often becomes a battleground where DNA results, text messages, testimonies, and emotional memories are displayed and questioned. What makes these moments so intense is not only what is proven, but what is lost. Trust, identity, imagined futures, and sometimes entire family structures. The legal system demands clarity, yet human emotions resist such sharp lines. This is where adverse inference and evidence act principles sometimes apply. When one party hides or withholds evidence, the court may infer that the truth is damaging. Silence itself becomes an answer. In the child support context, the outcome of a DNA test connects legal responsibility to biological identity. The state, the court, and the family are woven together by both law and emotional expectation. The Supreme Court in many legal systems has historically ruled that biological certainty is necessary for assigning financial and parental responsibility, yet emotional fatherhood does not always follow biological fact. A man may act as a father for years, only to learn through laboratory confirmation that the child does not share his DNA. That knowledge can crush identity, and yet, there are moments, extraordinary moments, when individuals choose emotional fatherhood despite biological results. These decisions demonstrate that justice is not always biological. Sometimes it is relational. However, in many cases, cheating stories create a traumatic chain reaction. Betrayal destroys stability. The discovery of infidelity often precedes the DNA test itself. The test then becomes not only a scientific process but a symbol of broken trust, an attempt to reclaim truth when communication has collapsed. These stories are deeply painful because they reveal not only who the parent is, but also how fragile human relationships can be when honesty is replaced by secrecy. Yet not every DNA-related case emerges from betrayal. Some come from adoption stories, full episodes where individuals seek identity, belonging, or closure. Adults search for biological roots to understand who they are. Children search for birth parents to fill emotional voids. In these situations, the DNA test becomes not a weapon, but a bridge between past and present. These reunions often show the celebrate recovery testimonies of people who turned their pain into growth. Healing becomes possible when truth is used to rebuild rather than destroy. This emotional landscape is frequently discussed in platforms like the Game-Changing Attorney podcast, the Divorce Course podcast, and the Truth Changes Everything podcast, where attorneys, psychologists, and individuals reflect on the consequences of truth being revealed in legal conflicts. These discussions emphasize that law is not just a professional field, it is a human one. In these conversations, speakers often highlight that the most painful truths are the ones that ultimately allow healing to begin. The transformation from emotional chaos to clarity resembles a recovery process where the individual must confront reality, accept it, and move forward. The strongest emotional weight falls on children. They do not choose the situations they are born into. They simply inherit the outcomes of adult choices. In Judge Lauren Lake's courtroom, the well-being of the child is always the central priority. The child is not evidence. The child is the future. The legal system seeks to ensure stability so that the next generation does not repeat the cycle of secrecy, betrayal, abandonment, or identity confusion. When couples appear in court during divorce, the DNA test may become a defining factor in property division, emotional closure, or custody arrangements. The truth may reinforce what one partner suspected, or may completely collapse every assumption held throughout the relationship. The emotional devastation is real. People walk into court believing they are fighting over a relationship. They discover that they are actually fighting for identity. Yet there are also stories of strength. Stories where truth brings clarity, forgiveness, maturity, and even peace. Some individuals use the truth as a starting point for rebuilding. They acknowledge their mistakes, repair relationships, and create new foundations. These testimonies of recovery demonstrate that even when truth destroys illusions, it can also create opportunities for new beginnings. The court does not only end relationships, it can also begin healthier ones. When Lauren Lake speaks to those in front of her, she is not merely instructing them on law, she is guiding them toward accountability. She reminds individuals that parenting is not determined by DNA alone, but by commitment, presence, and responsibility. Yet at the same time, she emphasizes that individuals deserve to know the truth of their biological identity. In her courtroom, justice is emotional, legal, and deeply human. This first portion of the description concludes with the understanding that DNA testing does not simply reveal parentage. It reveals who people are when confronted with truth. Some break, some grow, some deny, some accept, but none remain unchanged.